The Galactic Council's transmission arrived on a Tuesday morning, and Lillian Chen would never forget the cold satisfaction in Ambassador Thexaval's voice as he delivered what he believed to be Earth's sentence. "By unanimous decision of the Council," the reptilian diplomat announced, his scales shimmering with barely concealed contempt, "the human colony of Earth is hereby designated as the relocation site for 6 million Valar refugees. Your world, being primitive and isolated, is deemed suitable for those no other civilization will accept." Lillian watched the holographic message from her cramped office at the United Nations Refugee Coordination Center, her coffee growing cold in her hands. Around her, colleagues sat frozen, faces pale with shock. 6 million beings, no species, no warning. Just dumped on humanity's doorstep like unwanted cargo. "They're sick," Christopher Martinez said quietly from the doorway, his weathered hands gripping a data tablet. The former Marine had seen enough wars to recognize cruelty when it showed its face. "The Valari. The file just came through. They're carrying a genetic disorder, something called Cascade Syndrome. Incurable. Fatal within 20 years. So the Council gave them to us as punishment," Lillian whispered, understanding dawning like ice in her chest. "They think we'll refuse, prove we're as heartless as they claim, or accept and watch our primitive world collapse under the strain." Christopher's jaw tightened. "What do we tell the Secretary General?" Lillian stood, squaring her shoulders against the weight of 6 million lives. "We tell her to prepare the welcome centers." The decision that followed wasn't unanimous. Nothing involving humanity ever was. Protests erupted in major cities. Politicians screamed about resources, about disease, about the burden of accepting what the entire galaxy had rejected. Economic models predicted collapse. Medical experts warned of pandemic potential. But something else happened too, something the Galactic Council had failed to calculate into their equations of human weakness. In a small town in Kansas, a church group converted their community center into temporary housing. In Mumbai, doctors began working 18-hour shifts to understand Cascade Syndrome. In São Paulo, engineers designed modular housing that could be constructed in days. In Tokyo, geneticists launched a research initiative with a name that translated simply to hope. When the first transport ships descended through Earth's atmosphere 6 months later, Lillian stood at the landing site in Nevada, Christopher beside her, watching vessels that looked more like prison barges than refugee carriers touch down on the desert floor. The Valari emerged slowly, blinking in Earth's unfamiliar sunlight. They were tall, willowy beings with luminescent skin that shifted through pastel hues, beautiful and utterly terrified. Many bore the telltale signs of Cascade Syndrome, tremors in their extremities, a fading of their natural bioluminescence, exhaustion that came from bodies slowly betraying them. An elderly Valari woman was the first to step onto Earth's soil. She stumbled, her legs weak from the journey. And before security could react, Christopher was there, catching her with the same careful strength he'd once used to carry wounded soldiers from battlefields. "Easy now," he said gently. "We've got you." The woman looked up at him with eyes like liquid silver, confusion and fear warring across her features. In broken universal standard, she whispered, "You help?" Christopher smiled, that warm expression that had comforted countless scared recruits over the years. "That's what family does." The word spread through the refugee crowd like wildfire. Family. These humans, these supposedly primitive beings, were calling them family. The integration wasn't smooth. Nothing worth doing ever was. Language barriers created frustration. Cultural differences sparked misunderstandings. The burden on Earth's resources was real and measurable. There were incidents, protests, and moments when the entire endeavor seemed ready to collapse under its own impossible weight. But humanity, in its stubborn, chaotic way, adapted. Lillian worked 20-hour days coordinating housing, education, and medical care. She watched Christopher train security teams not in crowd control, but in cultural sensitivity. She saw teenagers in Beijing teaching Valari children to play basketball. She read reports of farmers in Argentina adjusting crop rotations to include Valari nutritional requirements. And she saw something else. Human scientists, freed from the Galactic Council's restrictions on primitive species, began making breakthroughs on Cascade Syndrome. Not because they had superior technology, but because they had something the advanced civilizations lacked: desperation born of compassion. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo's team in Lagos was the first to crack the genetic code. "It's a cascade failure in their cellular repair mechanisms," she explained during a video conference, exhaustion and triumph mixing in her voice. "We've been approaching it wrong. It's not a disease to cure, it's a system to support." The treatment they developed wasn't elegant by galactic standards. It required daily medications synthesized from earth plants, regular monitoring, and lifestyle adjustments. But it worked. Cascade Syndrome became manageable, chronic rather than fatal. 5 years after the Valari arrived, Lillian stood before the Galactic Council once more. This time she wasn't watching a hologram. Earth had earned its seat at the table. Ambassador Thexval looked distinctly uncomfortable as Lillian presented Earth's report. Behind her, translated into every major galactic language, statistics scrolled: employment rates, cultural integration metrics, medical breakthrough documentation. And one number that made the council chamber fall silent: 0 Valari deaths from Cascade Syndrome in the past 18 months. "You gave us 6 million refugees as punishment," Lillian said, her voice carrying through the chamber with quiet strength. "You expected us to fail, to prove that humanity was too primitive, too selfish, too weak to handle what you called an impossible burden." She smiled then, and there was something fierce in it, something that made even the most advanced species in the chamber lean back slightly. "We didn't fail. We adapted. We learned. We thrived. Because that's what humans do. We look at the impossible and say, 'Watch this.'" She paused, letting her words sink in. "And those 6 million Valari? They're not refugees anymore. They're citizens. They're neighbors. They're family." Christopher, standing in the Earth delegation section, caught her eye and nodded. Around them, 67 Valari representatives, elected by their communities, fully integrated into human society, stood in solidarity. "We didn't call it punishment," Lillian continued. "We called it Tuesday, and then we got to work." The council adjourned without comment, but Lillian didn't need their validation. She had something better. A message from her daughter back home, a photo attached. In it, her granddaughter grinned gap-toothed at the camera, arm around her best friend, a young Valari girl whose bioluminescence sparkled with health and happiness. The caption read simply, "Family Photo Day at School." Humanity hadn't just survived the council's punishment, they'd turned it into something beautiful, something uniquely human. They'd proven that civilization wasn't measured in technology or power, but in the simple, radical act of caring for one another. And the galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again.